Hey guys, Brad Speed here. Today I'm going to be putting the Acerbis upgrade fuel tank in the CRF250L. I got it behind me. To be honest, I wasn't going to make a video. I got sort of about halfway through. I've taken the factory tank off. And I thought it was a bit of a pain getting the fuel connections off. If you didn't know what you were doing or you weren't very careful, you'd very easily break the fuel line fitting. So I thought I'd just quickly show you while I have it sort of apart before I've put the new fuel tank on. The other thing I'm a little bit curious about is I had watched a couple of videos of people trying to put the Acerbis upgrade tank that I've bought on their 250L, and a couple of people have said that they had a big issue with it not fitting properly. So I'm a little bit curious to see how it fits. Some people seem to think it doesn't fit at all, and others have had no problems. So I don't know whether it's like between these years they didn't fit and then Acerbis worked it out and they fixed it and now it does fit. I guess I'm going to find out when I go to put the new one on. I've been a little bit under the weather for a couple of weeks, so I sound a bit crap, but I'll show you this fuel fitting and I'll show you the old tank where it fits on, and hopefully if you're doing this at home it might make it a little bit easier for you, because if you break that fuel fitting it's going to be really painful getting a new one from Honda and fitting it. All right, there's the bike. Fuel tank's off. So here's our factory fuel tank down here. So there's our main fuel line there. This one here, I've forgotten the name of the bloody things, but they're basically just like a pressure relief. So, if the pressure built up in the fuel tank, breather, that's it. Damn it, can't remember that name. Breather line. Anyway, main fuel tank line. If you've done carbureted bikes before, pulled the fuel tank off, you'd know that as soon as you pull the fuel line off, fuel pisses out everywhere. Now, because these are injected, the fuel pump acts as a fuel tap and a pump. So with the bike off, it actually shuts the fuel off, and you can pull this line off and maybe a little bit of fuel will dribble out of the fuel line on the other end, but it won't dribble out of here. So my tank's actually nearly full, so I was a little bit concerned about it possibly leaking out here, but it didn't, so that's good. But the bit I want to show you, you see this little sort of lip ring here. Now the fuel line attaches to this. Here's our main fuel line here. So when I took it off, basically there's two bolts up here and one bolt through here that comes out from in and out from the left hand side of the bike. So you take those off. There's the breather hose there, and this is the plug for the fuel pump. Just release those, and I sort of laid the tank over this side so I can get to the fuel line. Now this fuel line, if you're not gentle and careful with this, you'll break it, and replacing this is not going to be a particularly fun job. You see it sort of press fit on there from the factory. To be honest, I would assume that if you had to get a new one of these from Honda, you'd have to replace the whole line going into the injector there. And I would assume it wouldn't be particularly cheap. So that's why I'm making this video. Hopefully I can make it easier on you. Now if you flip it around this way, hopefully you can see inside that little slot there, there's two little clips. See, it's sort of just inside there. Now, these clips are essentially like little hook clips, right? So on the fuel tank down here, so, the finger's a much bigger version of it, but as they slide over that little snap ring, they open up and then snap shut on the inside of it so it doesn't fall off. So when you're doing it, you need to, there it is, very gently try and pick those apart. Now what I did is I'm a panel beater, so all my good tools are at work. I just got these crappy ones at home, but I fashioned myself a little pick out of a small flat blade screwdriver. Now what I did is I used this to gently sort of put it in there and pry that little clip apart. And what I did was I sort of clipped the left hand side first and just released it a little bit. You sort of angled it so it wouldn't re-clip itself. And then I did the same with the right hand side and it sort of slid off. It did take me about 10 minutes to get this off because I was just being really careful and I didn't want to break it. So just take your time, but that was how I did it. And the other thing is, before you can do that, you have to take the locking or retaining clip out of it. So this actually slots into it. I won't put it back in. Go back in focus. So this slots into there like that. The idea of this is to lock the system so it can't, accidentally rattle or fall off. This sort of locks everything in. Now this, similarly, I used the screwdriver little pick that I made to get this out. Now this has at the very top, where my index finger is, you see the sort of clip, I'm sort of squeezing it now. Now that is what holds this in. So I used two screwdrivers. I used a slightly bigger one to push this pin down, and I used the same sort of method with that pick. I put it up into the center here and I gently pull it out left side, right side, you know, one little bit at a time until it came all the way out. You probably don't need to clip it completely out, but I did. I didn't want any potential of it getting in the way and being a pain, or it falling off and falling into the bike somewhere and disappearing. So that one comes out first. So squeeze the clip, gently pick it out, pop it out, and then gently pick the fuel line out. And then obviously, like I said, no fuel's going to sort of spill out anywhere, because that fuel pump does a good job of blocking off the tap. All right, I brought my new tank out here just to put together. I actually spilled fuel all over the floor, draining the old tank, and it stinks in there now. I'm going to give it a couple of minutes to air out. But I've got my instructions here. They're actually not bad instructions, gives you a pretty good, you know, little key here of all the different components that come. I've sort of sorted them out into their respective categories. Now, it says here, highly recommend, or highly suggest to use anti-seize grease and lubricant on bolts going into the tank's metal inserts when installing. Now, there's two really important things here. These brass inserts, there's actually some down here that these bolt to, I've already bolted up. They're essentially just pressed into the plastic, so if you over tighten them, you're going to rip it out of the plastic, and it's going to be a total nightmare. So don't over tighten them, just really gentle. Now, leading into that, they want you to use anti-seize grease. Now, this is a rattly single cylinder 250, and bolts are going to rattle loose. They regularly rattle loose on me, particularly body bolts and body screws. And because this is bolted straight to the chassis, directly above the top of the cylinder, it's going to get a lot of sort of rattling happening, and I'm a little bit concerned about these bolts rattling loose. So what I've done, instead of using anti-seize, I've used a little bit of Loctite or thread locker. Now, the whole idea of using anti-seize is so it doesn't oxidize inside there and get the bolt stuck. Now, because you're not doing them up very tight, I'm really concerned that they're going to rattle loose and you're going to have a tank half hanging off while I'm 5k's out in the bush. That's going to be a bit of a nightmare. So the thing with the Loctite is it also creates a bit of a barrier for oxidization. So it's going to do two things. It's going to stop the oxidization because it's created a barrier between the two different metals, and it's stopping essentially oxygen and also water from getting into that in between that thread and causing it to seize up. But it's also going to stop it from rattling loose without me having to do it up mega tight. So I can just nip it up, just gently, just firm, and I know that that's not going to rattle loose, which would be a big concern if I just put anti-seize or something like that in there. So I thought I'd just quickly trial fit this. I've fit my little doovers up, little rubber tank mounts that slot into these little slots in the tank. Now, I don't know whether this is the issue that everyone has or not, but when you try, or the issue that I sort of spoke about earlier, I've seen some other people have some fitment issues. So I'm going to slot that one in, right? So that one slots in right. Yeah, see it's in the slot. Yep. All right, let's go to the other side. Now, aside from, I'm probably going to have to move my wireless charging head mount. I'll muck around with that later. But you'll see this is very tight. It doesn't want to fit. Now, it does make me a little bit curious if this is the issue that other people have had. Now, I have to fess up to something a little bit. This is going somewhere. Let's back off. I was a little bit preoccupied mucking around with my new GoPro when I was filming this earlier, and I did something a bit stupid. Instead of bolting these up here where they go, I tried to bolt them to here. Now, my radiator brace adds a bit of thickness to the mount, so I actually shaved down one of the little washers, this one, that little aluminium tube. I shaved it down thinking that I needed to fit it here and it was going to be too thick and I need to shave some down to make up for this difference. So when I realized what I'd done, I added some washers to it to make up that gap again that I had shaved down. Now I think this is actually going to work to my advantage here because I'm just going to pull a couple of those washers back out, and I think that's going to fix this issue and make the tank fit a bit nicer. Take one more. Which is hard doing some of this stuff one-handed. Alright, let's sit you back on there. Okay, a little bit of mucking around, but it does fit. That one's in there nice. And you can see that one's in there pretty nice as well. Look, to be honest, I think this is probably the issue that a lot of people have. Maybe Acerbis have changed the tank since, I don't know. But what happens is this little piece of the tank here, that little piece there that comes in, you see it's really tight against this little, I guess you call it a speed clip, this little threaded clip here that the bolt goes into, it hits it and it gets stuck. And it's a real pain. You see, I've mucked around with the washers in there. I think I've ended up putting one extra washer, one washer on the other side and 3 on this side. And that seemed to be, you know, where it's at. You can see it's in the right spot because it's lining up through there. So I'll go get the other rubber washer and spacer from the original tank. I'll fit that up. I'll put my fuel pump in now, now that I know it's going to fit. And I think we should be good. The other thing I mentioned is that it's so close to my brace. I think I'm probably going to have to shave that edge down a little bit, which I'll just do with the power file. But and I've seen a couple other guys in videos have to do the same thing. I just thought before I did any permanent modifications to the bike that I couldn't undo, or pain in the butt things like pulling the fuel pump out of the old tank, I'd just make sure that it actually fit. And it definitely does fit. Geez, it's a tight fit, because I guess they're trying to get the maximum fuel capacity, you know, fill up every little extra bit of space they can to get that capacity, but it definitely does fit. So I'm gonna go ahead and swap the rest of the parts over, and yeah, probably catch up after that. Okie dokie, with the crappy part of getting the tank to fit done, it's time to move over the bits of the original tank to the new tank. So that's the fuel pump, the whole mechanism, which is actually the fuel sensor in there as well. And then there's this little rubber, which I've already moved over. Just you push the center spacer out and then pull the rubbers out, and then you do the reverse to get it in. Rubbers in first. I would recommend just using a bit of, you know, I've used this, which is like an lanolin sort of based WD-40 sort of thing. I really like this particular brand. But anyway, that one's over, so it's time to do this. Now when you're doing this, just be careful, because there's like a little float in there, which is part of the fuel level sensor. So just gently work it out. Okay, there it is, there's a little float. So that tells you your level. So just keeping in mind the way you pulled it out. So I've pulled it out this, you know, the fuel outlet towards the top. So I'm going to do the same thing with a new tank. Now we'll just mention the seal is part of it. In the instructions it sort of makes it look like it's a separate part, but it is just part of it. That seal's still really nice and clean, so I'm not going to touch it. So our mating surface here is nice and clean, that metal. It's going to slide it in. Alright. The instructions want you to use these bolts to affix the fuel pump. So on the original tank it has studs with nuts. The Acerbis tank uses bolts with washers. Now, it does very clearly specify in the instructions to tighten these up to 5 Newton meters. I would assume this would be because they don't want you to rip these little brass studs out of the tank. So this is really important. I actually have a little quarter drive torque wrench. I recommend getting one of these for these bikes. I use it for my my sprocket bolts, the front sprocket bolts. They're a really small thread and they're really easy to overdo and snap. I've seen heaps of guys you know, on the forums complaining about snapping these bolts, and they're a weird thread. You have to get them from Honda. They're like a 7mm thread. You can't get them from anywhere else. So, you know, probably a good idea just to have one of these anyway. You know, it might seem pedantic doing these up to 5 Newton meters and making sure that it's right, but you know, man, like this is, you know, it's like a $500 tank. You know, do you really want to strip that bolt and get fuel leaks and break it? No, you don't. So for the sake of $50, just get yourself a torque wrench and do it properly. I'm going to use a tiny bit of thread locker on these ones too. Like I said, this fuel pump assembly is directly above the cylinder head, so it's going to be a lot of vibrations happening. I was going to mention something else I've noticed. This seems a little bit odd, like there's a gap between here, like it should be flush, but it actually shouldn't. The factory tank has this plate here that actually elevates it, but because of the plate it kind of obscures the fact that it's not flush against the tank. So that's actually normal, but I've got all my bolts in there. I'm going to grab my torque wrench. I'm going to start doing these up. Now I'm going to use the star pattern because that's always what you should do. Starting to get a bit tighter. Oh, there it is. Probably one more. There it is. There it is. Chuck this one in. This is a slot for the seat. Just firm, not tight. Pretty happy with that. I put a little bit of Loctite on that one as well. All right, I think we're pretty much ready to chuck this puppy on. There's a couple of brackets I've got to put on once we get to it. Where are they? That one's done there. We just done that. Okay, got to chuck these brackets on after, but we'll do that in a minute. I think that's just for the body mountings anyway. All right, and then this one here, I mentioned the breather. They just want you to put a screw in the top of the breather. I was tempted just to pull the breather line out, but I don't know, one day I might sell this bike and I might want to take the tank off for some reason, put the factory one back on. So I'm going to do what they say. I'm going to put that screw in the end of the breather to block it off. I also have to pull off that little black bit of plastic on the right hand panel because it'll interfere with the tank. So let's go ahead and get this tank on the bike, I think. Just show you, so these little clips up there, I did have to use my little pick tool just to stretch them over that lip properly. They didn't want to just slide back on. So I've got them on now, it's on properly. I'm going to go ahead and chuck my locking clip back in, and that should make sure that everything stays on there and doesn't fall off. Got that clip back in. It was a bit of a pain, if I'm honest. It's pretty fragile and sort of finicky to get in there, and I really didn't want to break it, so I ended up putting a bit of dodgy light, bit of like WD-40 on the clips, just to make sure that they slid in nicely, and it popped in. Although a little bit of a pain, it did pop in nicely. Just going to encourage that slot to line up. Very hard to do with one hand. I have to slide it back a little bit. It's all mounted up. You can see these little bushes, little rubber mounts there in properly. This side, you can maybe see, yeah, that's in properly. And the bolt in here, that's all in properly as well. I reconnected the fuel lines, they're all happy. Connected the plug for the fuel pump. I've chucked this little screw in the end of the breather. And I just sort of poked out through here just so it's out of the way. I've chucked these little C brackets on, put a little bit of Loctite in there, obviously used the slightly longer bolt that comes with the radiator brace for that. And I chucked these little clips on the end of them. I tightened all these up before I put the tank back on, as well as tightening those bolts for this. It's all on. Look, to be honest, this is the first Acerbis product I've put on that I was a little bit disappointed with. The fitment wasn't great. It needed to be mucked around with. I'm still not particularly happy with it, if I'm totally honest. It's sort of hard to show in the video, but it's a little bit wonky. It doesn't seem to be, you'd think that would be sitting all the way down in there. You can manipulate it. It's sort of, I know it's a rubber mount, so it's supposed to move, but should the whole tank be sliding in and out of the mount? I don't think so. I put a new tank on. I did a CB250 Cafe Racer a year or so ago, and I put a different tank on it that I bought, and I made up all the mounts. And my mounts that I made at home with a welder, they did not fit like this. They fit nicely and properly, and this doesn't fit properly. In my opinion, it's a bit wonky. And for the money that you pay for these, you expect them to fit properly. You expect them to fit as per the instructions. You don't expect to have to put washers and muck around with it and spend a while fiddling with it to get it to fit. So to be honest, I'm a little bit disappointed. It does fit, it does work. I haven't started it up yet, but I can't see why it wouldn't work. It's just a little bit disappointing. Much as I said I use Loctite on all the other bolts, these external ones, I'll definitely use like a WD-40 or an anti-seize type product. The reason being, those ones underneath, you can't really get to them very easily after the fact. These body bolts, every time I go out, I come back, I clean my bike. I go over it, and I usually will check these bolts. So, I'm not super worried about them coming loose. I am a little bit worried about them seizing up because I've had it happen once before and it was a bit of a pain. Final comments. Does it fit? Yes. Does it fit well? No, not really. Does it fit nicely? Is it nice to try and fit on the bike? No, not really either. Looks alright. I like that it's clear. You can see the fuel level. I've had a couple of guys say that the fuel sensor, because it's designed for the 5 litre tank, basically shows a full tank until you get down to your last 5 meters, but it's kind of 5 litres, sorry. That's why I chose the clear one, so you can really easily see the level. But look, it fits okay. This side actually fits pretty well. The gaps are nice. I had to kind of stretch the panel in a couple of spots to get it to fit. Like it doesn't, it wants to pop out up here now, which is a little bit annoying. It seems like the whole tank has to like go forward, but it physically can't. It physically can't go forward. And likewise, there's like a little wrinkle in the seat here now, which there wasn't before, because I think the seat's up very slightly. Where the little plastic slot is in here, I had to just extend it very slightly to get it to actually go in enough to get these bolts in. You know, I literally jumped on this trying to get the tank just to sit forward a bit more, and it physically cannot. So this is where it sits. Couple of little things. This doesn't fit nicely anymore. I can put a clip in here. I've actually lost it, but it definitely doesn't fit up here. There's not a snowball's chance in hell. The tank, when you put it on, the new mounts for the panels actually move them out. You know, I'd say probably about 15 mil, maybe a little bit more, probably more like 20 actually. But yeah, so this sort of stuff doesn't fit real nice anymore. That doesn't bother me too much. It's just a little bit annoying. This side fit sort of a bit worse than the right hand side. You see the gaps are kind of on the piss. They're not right. This is bulging. You know, I could muck around with this bracket back behind here a little bit, which I'll probably end up doing, but it just, yeah, it doesn't fit beautiful. I'd say probably part of this is that the radiator brace kind of throws a little bit. So, and it was like that even before. I guess I just didn't have a frame of reference down here because the factory tank finishes up here, but it could be that, to be fair, on the on Acerbis. But look, it's a dirt bike, so it's going to get dropped and bashed up, and so it's annoying. But is it mega concerning? No, not really. But yeah, and then same on this side. This doesn't really want to sit in properly anymore. It keeps popping out. But look, in the grand scheme, a lot of these things matter. Not really, but my range is going to go from, you know, 140 k's to 350 or something. You know, like quite a huge increase. So I guess that's kind of cool. It looks a bit more trail bikey as well, which I guess, you know, I guess that's nice. I end up being able to move this, and I sort of chopped this short because I don't know where this is meant to clip. It doesn't kind of clip anywhere, but anyway, I don't know what it's meant to clip on down here up somewhere. I don't know, maybe because mine's all aftermarket up here, it doesn't work how it's meant to. But if I trimmed this so short so I can still clip my phone on there, which it just fits. And then same with my mirrors. My mirrors just clear the tank at full lock. Not that you're at full lock very often, but you know, so it does all fit. You know, I think I might have been a little bit harsh on it before because I was frustrated. If something happened to this bike and I had to buy another one, I reckon I probably would put another Acerbis tank on it. I know what to do now to get it to work. You know, I still think everything I said earlier is correct, that, you know, for the money that you pay, you really expect it to fit a bit better than it does. And, you know, it should be a bit easier to install as well. I think maybe the instructions could be slightly more in depth as well. But you know what? It's not bad. It's a little bit frustrating, but, you know, sometimes you got to make things work. And like I said, it's a dirt bike. It's not, you know, it's not a show pony. It's just meant to get the job done. So, you know, I think all in all, I think probably a good upgrade. I don't regret it. I wish it was a little cheaper, but, you know, I think it's good. I think it's good.